There is a bird sitting perfectly still in the dark right now, in a tree you would walk past without noticing, watching the field below with eyes that gather light in a way no other bird's eyes can, hearing a mouse move through grass beneath 6 centimeters of snow from 30 meters away, and doing all of this in complete silence, because every feather on its body has been shaped by millions of years of selection into the quietest flight surface in the animal kingdom. The owl is not simply a nocturnal bird, it is a different kind of bird altogether, one that has departed so fundamentally from the architecture of ordinary birds that almost every system in its body has been rebuilt around a single organizing principle: to be the most effective predator that darkness has ever produced. The eyes that cannot move in their sockets, the ears set at different heights on the skull so they hear the same sound at different times and triangulate its location in 3 dimensions. The facial disc of feathers that acts like a satellite dish focusing sound waves. The hollow, comb-edged flight feathers that silence the air. Tonight we will follow the owl gently through all of it. Through the biology of a head that turns 270 degrees because the eyes inside it cannot turn at all. Through the ears that hear better than any other birds. Through the velvet darkness of a hunting flight that makes no sound that prey can detect. And into the quieter questions about what it is like to be a mind built entirely for the night. So let this room grow as still as the owl in its tree. Let your breathing slow to the patient rhythm of something that knows how to wait. And drift with me into the dark hour when the owl opens its eyes and the night begins to belong to it entirely. The first thing to understand about owl eyes is that they are not eyes in the conventional bird sense at all. Most birds have relatively small, round, laterally placed eyes that provide a wide field of view to either side, sacrificing depth perception for panoramic coverage that helps detect approaching predators from any direction. Owl eyes are enormous, forward-facing, and tubular rather than spherical, oriented toward the front of the face to provide the overlapping binocular vision that generates the precise depth perception needed to judge distances accurately in low light when hunting. In a great gray owl, the eyes are roughly the same size as human eyes, but packed into a skull considerably smaller than a human head, occupying so much of the skull's interior that there is almost no room left for the eye socket to allow rotation. The eyes are fixed in place, held firm by a ring of small bones called sclerotic ossicles that maintain the tubular shape under the mechanical stress of the compressive muscles of the eye socket. The owl cannot move its eyes, not even slightly. It sees only what is directly in front of it. This immobility of the eyes is what drives one of the most iconic and widely known owl behaviors, the head rotation. To compensate for the inability to glance sideways or upward with eye movements, the owl rotates its entire head with a speed and range that initially appears anatomically impossible. An owl can turn its head up to 270 degrees in one direction, approaching almost the full circle without moving its body, and it can snap from one extreme to the other so quickly that casual observation suggests the head has rotated further than anatomy permits. The skeletal and vascular infrastructure that makes this rotation possible without cutting off blood flow to the brain or pinching the spinal cord is an engineering solution of considerable elegance. The vertebral column of the owl contains more cervical vertebrae than most birds, giving the neck more rotational segments. The carotid arteries that carry blood to the brain are supported by a system of pooling vessels and anastomoses that maintain cerebral blood flow even when the neck is turned to its extreme limits. and a cushioning mechanism of air sacs around the vertebral arteries prevents compression that would otherwise restrict flow during maximal rotation. The owl has rebuilt its entire neck vasculature around the compensation for the eye's immobility. The optical properties of owl eyes are adapted for light gathering to a degree that no other bird has approached. The large cornea and large pupil that define the front of the eye admit far more light than the small pupilled eyes of diurnal birds, collecting photons from the dim environment with the efficiency of a wide aperture camera lens. The retina at the back of the eye is densely packed with rod photoreceptors, the cells specialized for low light detection, to a density that is among the highest measured in any vertebrate retina. The lens of the eye is large relative to the eye's dimensions, and the tubular rather than spherical eye shape places the retina at the focal length of this large lens, maximizing the size of the image formed on the retinal surface, and therefore the amount of detail captured per photon collected. Behind the retina, a tapetum lucidum, a reflective layer that bounces unabsorbed light back through the retinal cells for a second pass at detection, further increases the efficiency of photon capture. The owl's eye is a biological night vision system, and its performance in near darkness has been measured to exceed that of human night vision by factors that are difficult to express as simple multiples, because the two systems operate so differently. The trade-off of this extraordinary low light sensitivity is reduced acuity in bright light and poor color vision in the conventional sense. The dense rod photoreceptors that capture dim light so effectively are largely replaced in areas of high spatial acuity in diurnal bird retinas by cone photoreceptors, which provide color information and fine detail in good light. Owls have relatively few cones, and their color vision is limited, probably operating in just one or two color channels rather than the rich tetrachromacy of many diurnal birds that can see into the ultraviolet range. In the ecological context in which owls hunt, this is not a significant disadvantage. Color information is genuinely not very useful in near darkness, where the primary task is detecting the shape, movement, and three-dimensional position of prey against a complex background, tasks for which the rod-dominated visual system is well optimized. The owl's eye is not deficient in color vision as a result of neglect or compromise. Color vision is simply not what the design budget was spent on, because in the dark, color is nearly irrelevant. The binocular field of owls, the area in front of the head where both eyes see the same space and depth perception, is generated through the comparison of the two slightly different retinal images, varies between species in ways that reflect their specific hunting habitats. Barn owls, which hunt in open fields and grassland where prey is detected primarily through hearing rather than vision, have a somewhat narrower binocular overlap than the great horned owl, which hunts in woodland where visual depth perception through foliage is more critical. The tawny owl of European woodlands has a binocular field adapted for navigating complex three-dimensional environments, while the burrowing owl, which hunts by day as much as by night, has eyes positioned slightly more laterally than most owls, providing a wider total field of view at some cost to binocular depth precision. The family of owls contains nearly 250 species distributed across every continent except Antarctica, and the variation in eye anatomy across this diversity reflects the specific visual demands of specific hunting strategies in specific habitats, each a refined solution to the problem of seeing in darkness as efficiently as the local ecology requires. One of the more counterintuitive aspects of owl vision is how it performs in truly total darkness. The popular notion that owls can see in absolute darkness is not quite accurate. No visual system based on photoreceptor cells can function without some ambient light for the cells to detect. And in conditions of genuinely zero illumination, owl vision is as blind as any other. But the threshold at which owl vision becomes functional is so much lower than that of other birds and most mammals that the distinction is operationally significant for most practical nocturnal hunting conditions. A night that appears completely dark to human eyes, with only starlight filtered through overcast sky, contains enough photons for an owl's eye to extract useful visual information. The barn owl specifically has been shown in laboratory studies to catch prey in light levels as low as 0.0000073 foot candles, an illumination so dim that most optical instruments have difficulty measuring it. At this threshold, the owl is not simply doing what other animals do, but more efficiently. It is doing something categorically different, operating a sensory system in conditions that are, for practical purposes, dark to everything else. If owl eyes are the most striking departure from the standard bird visual system, owl ears are the most functionally revolutionary departure from any bird auditory system, and their capabilities have been studied in detail that reveals a degree of sensory engineering so precise that researchers continue to find new layers of sophistication in what initially appears to be a simple morphological asymmetry. The ears of many owl species, most famously the barn owl, are located at different heights on the skull, with the left ear opening positioned higher than the right, or vice versa, depending on the species. This vertical asymmetry, which produces no analog in the ear anatomy of other birds, means that the same sound reaches the two ears not just at slightly different times due to horizontal separation, but at slightly different intensities and with slightly different frequency spectra due to the vertical displacement. The brain processes both the horizontal timing difference and the vertical intensity difference simultaneously, computing from these two independent acoustic measurements the precise three-dimensional direction of the sound source. The precision of this three-dimensional acoustic localization has been measured in barn owls with a rigor that continues to impress researchers who study sensory systems. A barn owl in a completely darkened chamber can locate and strike a target that produces only faint rustling sounds with an angular accuracy of approximately 1 degree in both the horizontal and vertical dimensions. This localization accuracy is not simply better than that of other animals in a quantitative sense. It represents a qualitatively different level of auditory spatial resolution, equivalent to the ability to locate a sound source within a space the size of a walnut at a distance of 10 meters using hearing alone. In field conditions, a hunting barn owl flying at night over grassland can detect the movement of a mouse beneath several centimeters of snow, locate it with sufficient precision to calculate an interception trajectory in flight, and deliver a lethal strike to the exact location of the mouse's head in complete darkness. The ears do what the eyes cannot. The facial disc of feathers that gives owls their characteristic flat-faced appearance is not simply an aesthetic feature, but an active component of the auditory system. The disc functions as a parabolic reflector, a biological satellite dish, collecting sound waves from a wide area in front of the owl and focusing them toward the ear openings hidden beneath the feathers on either side of the face. The stiff, tightly packed feathers that form the rim of the disc create a physical barrier that reflects and guides sound waves, and the softer feathers of the disc interior channel the concentrated acoustic energy toward the ear openings with a directionality that amplifies the apparent intensity of sounds arriving from in front of the owl. Owls can actively reshape the facial disc to some degree by adjusting the position of the feathers through small facial muscles, changing the focal properties of the disc and tuning its sensitivity toward different directions or frequency ranges as the hunting situation demands. The face of an owl is not just a face, it is a listening apparatus. The frequency range of owl hearing is specifically tuned to the sounds made by their primary prey. In barn owls, which hunt small rodents primarily, the auditory sensitivity is highest in the frequency range between 2 and 10 kHz, which encompasses the rustling sounds made by mice and voles moving through vegetation, and the ultrasonic components of rodent vocalizations. This frequency tuning is not simply a passive property of the ear anatomy, but reflects the active frequency response of the hair cells in the cochlea, which have been shaped by selection to be most sensitive at the frequencies that carry the most information about prey location. The inner ear of barn owls is proportionally longer than that of most other birds, providing more basilar membrane length for frequency resolution and more cochlear hair cells for sensitivity at the critical frequencies. The auditory system, from the external ear disc through the middle ear mechanics to the inner ear, is a single integrated frequency-specific detection system, each component optimized for the same target frequency range. The auditory processing in the owl brain represents perhaps the most striking element of the whole system, because the localization computation that converts the slight timing and intensity differences between the two ears into a precise three-dimensional target location requires neural processing of extraordinary precision. The barn owl brain contains dedicated neural circuits, particularly in the external nucleus of the inferior colliculus, that perform this computation through a mechanism based on delay lines and coincidence detectors, where neurons fire maximally when inputs from the two ears arrive simultaneously, signaling that the sound reached both ears at the same time and therefore originated from directly ahead. Neurons sensitive to other interaural timing differences are arranged in a spatial map of horizontal angle, and a separate population of neurons sensitive to interaural intensity differences generates a corresponding vertical angle map. The combination of these two maps creates a two-dimensional neural representation of auditory space that the barn owl's brain can read like a coordinate system, with the neural firing pattern corresponding directly to the three-dimensional direction of the sound source. This neural space map was one of the first such topographic maps of auditory space identified in any vertebrate brain, and it has become a model system for understanding how neural circuits compute spatial information from sensory inputs. The ability of owls to hunt by sound alone has been tested under conditions that push the system to its absolute limits. In a series of experiments conducted by Masakazu Konishi at Caltech in the 1970s and 1980s, barn owls were trained to catch prey in gradually reduced light until the chamber was in complete darkness, and the owls continued to catch prey at their normal accuracy rate with no light at all. When the prey was moved to a new location between trials, the owls adjusted their trajectory to the new location on the first strike, demonstrating that they were localizing in real time through sound rather than using a remembered location. When the sound-reflecting properties of the prey were altered in ways that disrupted the acoustic cues without moving the prey, the owls missed, confirming that the localization was acoustic rather than based on any residual visual information. The experiments established beyond doubt that the barn owl's sound localization system is not a supplement to vision, but a fully independent and fully competent hunting system that can operate in total darkness with the same accuracy that vision provides in adequate light. No other bird, and very few other animals of any kind, can make that statement. A large bird flying through the night produces sound. The wings beat against the air, creating turbulence that radiates as noise, and this noise travels ahead of the bird toward the prey below, alerting it to the approaching predator and triggering escape behavior long before the bird arrives. This is why most large raptors hunt primarily by sight in daylight, rather than by surprise attack in the dark. The aerodynamic noise of flight betrays the approach, and vision at a distance allows the attack to be initiated from far enough away that the prey's escape response time is not a critical factor. The owl has solved this problem by evolving a flight feather surface that is, by any physical measurement, the quietest wing structure found anywhere in the animal kingdom, silencing the aerodynamic noise of flight to a level below the detection threshold of the prey it hunts. The primary feathers of owls have 3 structural modifications that together eliminate the aerodynamic noise that their size and wing loading would otherwise produce. The leading edge of the primary feathers, the edge that meets the incoming airflow first, is equipped with a row of stiff, comb-like serrations, tiny tooth-like projections spaced at regular intervals along the feather's edge that break up the uniform leading edge into a series of fine points. In a normal bird feather, the sharp, uniform leading edge creates a turbulent airflow wake as air passes over it, and this turbulence is the primary source of aerodynamic noise. The serrations break the single large vortex shed from the leading edge into many tiny vortices, each too small to generate significant acoustic energy, distributing the turbulent energy across a frequency range too high to be detected by the auditory systems of small rodents. The trailing edge of the primary feathers carries a corresponding fringe of soft, flexible filaments that suppress the trailing edge noise generated as the airflow separates from the back of the feather, and the surface of the flight feathers is covered with a velvet-like layer of interlocking barbules that absorb the remaining aerodynamic turbulence before it can radiate as sound. 3 independent noise reduction mechanisms working simultaneously produce a wing that is, in acoustic terms, essentially silent. The silent flight of owls has been measured quantitatively using acoustic instrumentation in wind tunnel experiments, and the comparison to other birds of comparable size is dramatic. A pigeon flying at the same speed as a tawny owl generates approximately 10 times as much aerodynamic noise as measured at equivalent distances. The owl's acoustic profile during flight, in the frequency ranges most relevant to its prey's hearing, is indistinguishable from the background acoustic noise of the environment through which it is flying, making the approaching owl acoustically invisible to any prey animal relying on hearing to detect aerial threats. This acoustic invisibility is not simply a matter of flying more quietly in a relative sense. The owl is achieving a genuine noise floor of flight, below which the sound of its approach cannot be detected, even by sensitive instruments at short range, let alone by the ears of a mouse in the grass below. The body feathers of owls contribute to the silent flight in a different way from the flight feathers. They are extraordinarily soft and downy, with a loose, fluffy texture that absorbs rather than reflects the sound of feather-on-feather contact as the wings move. In other birds, the stiff, interlocking structure of body feathers produces a faint but detectable rustling sound during flight as feathers slide against each other with each wing beat. In owls, the softness of the body feathers eliminates this secondary noise source entirely. The entire feather coat of an owl is acoustically absorbent, turning the bird into a noise-free flying body through the combination of sound-absorbing body plumage and the noise-generating suppression in the flight feathers. Engineers studying bio-inspired design for aeronautical applications have been studying owl feather structure for decades, applying the comb serration principle to the leading edges of wind turbine blades, aircraft wings, and propellers to reduce the aerodynamic noise of those structures in ways that have direct engineering and commercial applications. The physical cost of the silent flight feather adaptations is a modest reduction in aerodynamic efficiency compared to what a smooth-edged feather would provide. The comb serrations and velvet surface create slightly more drag per unit of lift than a conventional aerodynamically optimized feather would generate, meaning the owl expends marginally more energy per unit of distance traveled than an equivalent bird with standard feathers. This efficiency cost is clearly worth paying in evolutionary terms, given how central silent flight is to the owl's hunting success. But it does impose limits on the maximum speed and sustained flight performance of owls compared to the fastest raptors. Hawks and falcons, hunting by sight at high speed in daylight, have smooth, aerodynamically efficient feathers that are not silent but do not need to be. Owls are optimized for acoustic stealth rather than speed, and their flight, while not fast by raptor standards, is supremely refined for its primary purpose of arriving above prey without any acoustic warning. The wing loading of different owl species, the ratio of body weight to wing area, varies in ways that reflect different ecological contexts for silent hunting. Large owls like the great gray owl have remarkably low wing loading relative to their body mass, with very large wings that generate lift at low flight speeds without increasing wing beat frequency, because slow flight produces less aerodynamic noise per unit of wing movement and allows more precise maneuvering above prey. Small owls like the little owl and the pygmy owl have higher wing loadings and fly faster, using their smaller size and agility rather than slow, silent approach to catch prey. The relationship between wing loading, flight speed, and acoustic stealth is one of the central design parameters around which different owl body plans have been tuned across the family's evolutionary diversification, and the variety of solutions found across the roughly 250 owl species reflects the range of habitats, prey types, and hunting contexts in which the fundamental owl design has been deployed. One of the more tangible connections between the owl and the world it hunts is the pellet, the compact mass of indigestible material that the owl regurgitates after processing a meal, and that contains, in remarkable completeness, the skeletal and surface remnants of everything the owl has eaten since its last regurgitation. The contents of an owl pellet are a direct record of diet, and the systematic collection and analysis of pellets from known owl roost and nest sites has become one of the most informative methods in ecological research for documenting small mammal and bird populations, distribution patterns, and community composition across large geographic areas. A scientist who collects a year's worth of pellets from beneath a single barn owl's roost and carefully disaggregates and identifies the skeletal contents has, in effect, a small mammal census of the area hunted by that owl, generated without a single mammal trap or direct observation. The anatomy of owl digestion that produces the pellet is a departure from the digestive physiology of most raptors, and explains why owl pellets contain far more complete and intact skeletal material than the pellets of hawks and falcons. Most raptors have a more acidic stomach environment that begins digesting bone and fur during the process of extracting the nutritional content of the prey, producing pellets with partially dissolved bones and fragmented skeletal material that is less useful for prey identification. Owls, whose stomach acid is less concentrated and less prolonged in contact with prey remains, pass the bones, fur, and feathers of their prey through the stomach with relatively little digestion, separating the nutritious soft tissue from the indigestible structural material and compacting the latter into a neat, oval pellet that is expelled through the beak. This relatively gentle digestive chemistry preserves bone integrity in the pellet, so that the small skulls of mice and voles recovered from barn owl pellets are often so complete and undamaged that they can be identified to species with precision that matches museum specimens. The pellet record of a single barn owl's winter hunting season has been studied in enough detail to reveal individual-level dietary preferences, changes in prey availability across the season, and even the individual hunting range of specific owls whose roosting sites are known. An owl that is hunting primarily voles in autumn may shift to mice or shrews in winter as full population cycle, and this shift is documented in the pellet record with a temporal resolution that reflects how frequently the owl hunts and the average number of prey items per pellet. Long-term pellet monitoring studies at fixed barn owl roost sites have tracked the changes in small mammal community composition over decades, providing ecological time series data of a quality difficult to generate through other means. The owl's pellet is, in this sense, a primary data product of a free-ranging ecological monitoring station, operating continuously and independently and requiring only someone willing to collect and sort its output. The behavior of pellet production itself provides insight into the rhythms of owl daily life. Owls typically produce 1 or 2 pellets per day, the timing determined by the digestion cycle of the previous meal. The pellet is formed in the muscular stomach, called the gizzard in birds, over a period of 6 to 10 hours after a meal, compacting as the gizzard contractions separate digestible material from indigestible and consolidate the latter into the characteristic oval shape. When the pellet is ready for expulsion, the owl adopts a characteristic posture with the bill slightly open and the head tilted forward, expelling the pellet with a visible muscular contraction. This behavior is so predictable in timing relative to the previous feeding event that experienced researchers who know when a captive owl last ate can predict within an hour or two when the pellet will be produced. The owl's body runs on a digestive clock, and the pellet production schedule is one of its most observable expressions. The study of historical pellet collections preserved in museum collections has extended the dietary time series for some owl species back hundreds of years, providing pre-agricultural and pre-industrial baseline data about small mammal communities in landscapes that have been dramatically transformed since the pellets were deposited. Barn owl pellet accumulations in caves and hollow trees, preserved by the dry conditions of the deposit site, have been dated by radiocarbon methods and their contents analyzed to track changes in mammal communities across periods of climate change, land use change, and species invasions. These deep-time pellet archives represent a form of paleoecological evidence that is uniquely detailed in its species resolution and uniquely accessible for analysis using conventional zoological methods. And they have contributed to an understanding of baseline ecological conditions in pre-modern landscapes that is relevant to conservation and restoration planning in the present day. A detail about pellets that occasional observers of captive owls find surprising is the way the owl handles the freshly produced pellet after expulsion. Rather than ignoring it, owls frequently spend a brief period examining the pellet with their bill and sometimes attempting to manipulate it. Behavior that has been interpreted variously as an extension of the prey-handling instinct, a sensory assessment of the pellet's composition, or simply an artifact of the muscular and behavioral reflexes associated with the swallowing and regurgitation sequence. Whatever its functional significance, this post-expulsion handling behavior is consistent across owl species in captivity and is sufficiently stereotyped to be considered a normal behavioral element of the pellet production cycle, rather than an individual quirk. The owl, in handling its own regurgitated pellet, is briefly engaging with the physical record of its previous night's hunting in a way that has no close parallel in the behavior of other raptors. The pellet analysis tradition in ecology has also contributed in unexpected ways to the documentation of species that are themselves difficult to observe directly. The presence of water shrews, harvest mice, and other cryptic small mammals in owl pellets from specific sites has provided the first confirmed evidence of those species in those areas, effectively using the owl as a free-ranging live trapping and identification system that operates through the night without human intervention. In areas where targeted small mammal survey work would be logistically or financially impractical, the systematic collection and analysis of pellets from known owl roost sites has been used as a cost-effective biodiversity assessment tool, providing species distribution data of genuine conservation relevance at a fraction of the effort that direct survey work would require. The owl's pellet is, from this perspective, not merely a biological curiosity or an educational object. It is a legitimate primary source of ecological data, produced nightly by a free-ranging biological instrument that has been refined over 60 million years to sample the small mammal community of its territory with extraordinary thoroughness, and then to package and preserve that sample for later retrieval. The popular image of the owl as a solitary creature of the night, isolated and independent, fitting an aesthetic of mystery and separateness from the social warmth of diurnal bird communities, does not accurately represent the social reality of most owl species. Many owls maintain strong pair bonds that persist across multiple breeding seasons, with pairs occupying and defending territories together, coordinating in the provision of food to young and maintaining vocal contact through the night that serves both territory advertisement and pair bond maintenance simultaneously. The duetting of owl pairs, in which the male and female exchange calls in coordinated sequences that can be identified as pair-specific interactions rather than simply individual territorial advertisement, is one of the more sonically memorable aspects of owl behavior for anyone who has spent time in owl habitat at night and been close enough to a pair to hear both partners of the exchange. The breeding biology of owls is organized around the simple but demanding reality that raising young owlets is a time-intensive and food-intensive process that requires coordinated parental investment from both members of a pair. The male's role during incubation is primarily to provision the female, who incubates the eggs and remains on the nest, with food carried to the nest from hunting trips that may range widely from the nest site. This provisioning relationship requires both the behavioral coordination of the pair and the hunting success of the male. And in years when prey availability is low, the male's provisioning rate directly determines whether the female can sustain incubation without abandoning the nest to feed herself. The number of eggs that female owls lay is not fixed, but responds to the prey conditions of the territory, with females in years of high prey abundance laying larger clutches than in lean years. This flexible clutch size reflects an evolved assessment of resource availability, that calibrates reproductive investment to the conditions that determine the survival of the investment. The communication between owling pairs extends beyond the simple territorial hooting that most people associate with owl vocalizations. Owls produce a diversity of calls, including contact calls, alarm calls, begging calls from young, aggressive calls during territory disputes, and soft calls between pair members during close-range social interaction. Many of these calls are individually distinctive, allowing pair members to identify each other by voice with the same precision that applies to prey location, and the pair bond is maintained across the months between breeding seasons, in part through the vocal exchanges that punctuate the night in established owl territories. The depth and individuality of the vocal repertoire has been studied in detail in well-studied species like the tawny owl and the great horned owl, and the complexity of what has been found consistently exceeds the initial expectation of researchers who begin with the assumption that owl vocalizations are primarily about territory defense rather than social communication. The relationship between parent owls and their owlets during the post-hatching period is one of the more intensive and extended parental commitments found among birds, and it has a specific educational dimension that distinguishes it from the simpler food provision relationship seen in many other species. Owlets do not leave the nest with hunting skills intact. They must learn to fly, to hunt, and to navigate their environment through a period of practice and refinement that takes several months, during which the parents continue to provide supplemental food, while also apparently facilitating the development of hunting competence by the manner in which prey is delivered. In some species, parents have been observed delivering live prey to developing owlets, rather than killed prey, allowing the young birds to practice the physical capture skills on prey that cannot escape quickly, a form of structured practice that has the quality of teaching without necessarily implying the intentionality that the word teaching usually carries. Whether owl parents genuinely intend to facilitate skill development, or whether the delivery of live prey is a behavior that happens to have this effect, is a question that animal behavioral science treats carefully. But the functional outcome for owlet development is real, regardless of the underlying intentionality. The winter communal roosting behavior of some owl species challenges the solitary image more directly than breeding biology does, because it involves the aggregation of multiple individuals at a common roost site for reasons that appear to be primarily social rather than simply a coincidence of habitat preference. Short-eared owls in winter, for example, congregate in communal roosts of dozens to hundreds of individuals, far more than could be explained by the available shelter in an area. Long-eared owls similarly form communal roosts that can contain up to 100 individuals in favorable locations. The social dynamics of these communal roosts involve some degree of individual recognition and social preference, with individuals showing consistent roosting associations with specific partners across multiple nights. The communal roost provides obvious benefits of shared vigilance against predators, with many pairs of eyes and ears attending to the environment simultaneously. But the persistence of individual social preferences within the roost suggests that the benefits may extend beyond simple vigilance to some form of social bond maintenance that carries through the winter into the following breeding season. One of the more recently documented aspects of owl social behavior is the existence of what researchers describe as play behavior in owlets and occasionally in adult owls, particularly in species like the burrowing owl that are diurnal and therefore more accessible to observation. Young owls engage in object manipulation that has no obvious functional purpose. carrying and dropping items, wrestling with siblings over inedible objects, and performing flight maneuvers that appear exploratory rather than directed toward any specific goal. These behaviors meet the standard criteria for animal play, being voluntary, intrinsically motivated, and not immediately goal-directed. And their presence in young owls suggests a period of behavioral flexibility and exploration that parallels the play phases documented in many other cognitively complex animals. Whether adult owls engage in anything comparable to play is harder to document given their nocturnal habits. But occasional reports from researchers and experienced owl handlers suggest that adult owls in captivity show persistent interest in novel objects and problem-solving contexts that goes beyond what simple conditioning would produce. The cognitive abilities of owls, assessed through laboratory studies on species amenable to training, reveal a level of problem-solving flexibility and memory capacity that is consistent with the demands of a hunting life in a complex, changing environment. Barn owls trained on spatial memory tasks can remember the locations of rewarded positions across time gaps of days and can update those memories rapidly when the reward contingencies change, demonstrating a spatial learning capability well suited to tracking the shifting distribution of prey across a home range through the seasons. Great gray owls and great horned owls in cognitive studies have demonstrated the ability to use social information, adjusting their behavior based on the observed behavior of conspecifics in ways that require a degree of social cognition unexpected in animals that are primarily solitary. The owl brain, while not large in absolute terms, contains neural structures associated with cognitive flexibility in birds, including a well-developed hippocampus linked to spatial memory and a nidopallium comparable to the association cortex of mammals. The intelligence of the owl is not the same kind of intelligence as that of a corvid or a parrot, which are the acknowledged cognitive champions of the bird world. It is calibrated to different demands and expressed in different behavioral contexts, but it is genuine, measurable, and considerably more substantial than the quiet stillness of a roosting owl during the day would suggest. The approximately 250 owl species distributed across every terrestrial habitat on Earth, from tropical rainforests to Arctic tundra to open ocean islands, represent one of the most successful adaptive radiations in bird evolution. And the diversity of body plans, hunting strategies, and ecological roles found across this radiation is a testament to how many different solutions the basic owl design can accommodate. The elf owl of the Sonoran Desert, weighing barely 40 grams, hunts insects and scorpions in the desert scrub, in a body so small it fits comfortably in the cup of a human hand. While the Blakiston's fish owl of Siberia and Japan weighs up to 4 kilograms, stands nearly 70 centimeters tall, and hunts fish in the rivers and streams of old-growth forest, wading at the water's edge and snatching fish from the shallows with its enormous, rough-and-soled talons. The difference in body size between these two owls is almost 100-fold, yet both are unmistakably owls, sharing the facial disc, the forward-facing eyes, the silent flight, and the precise auditory localization that define the family. The ecological specializations of different owl species reveal how the core owl toolkit has been adapted to exploit resources that would be inaccessible to a generalist predator. The fishing owls, of which 3 species exist in the family Ketupa of Asia, and 3 more in the African genus Scotopelia, have evolved a set of specific adaptations for aquatic prey capture that include non-waterproof plumage that does not need to be silent in the air because aquatic prey cannot hear through the water surface, bare feet with spiny projections on the toe pads for gripping slippery fish, and a fishing behavior that involves either perching above the water and striking with the feet, or wading in the shallows and pursuing fish directly. The silent flight feather adaptations that are so critical to the hunting success of terrestrial owls are, for fishing owls, unnecessary, and the energetic cost of maintaining them would be a disadvantage. And fishing owl feathers are correspondingly less elaborate in their noise suppression structure. Evolution has stripped the silent flight mechanism from a lineage that does not need it, demonstrating the conditional nature of all adaptive traits. The burrowing owl of the open grasslands of North and South America has departed from the standard owl body plan in multiple ways that reflect a life spent primarily on the ground rather than in trees. It has evolved proportionally long legs for standing upright and walking on the ground surface, a posture unusual among owls whose legs are typically short and powerful for gripping perching branches or prey. It is active in daylight as well as at night, exploiting a habitat and prey community that requires diurnal activity patterns rather than strict nocturnality. It nests in burrows excavated by other animals or in pre-existing cavities in the ground, rather than in tree holes or cliff ledges. And it has developed a specific behavioral defense, in which threatened individuals produce a rattling call that closely mimics the sound of a rattlesnake, an acoustic mimicry that deters many potential predators from investigating the burrow entrance. The burrowing owl is an owl that has reinvented itself as a ground-dwelling, diurnal prairie specialist, while retaining the fundamental sensory and morphological characteristics of the family it belongs to. The snowy owl represents the most northerly adaptation of the family, breeding on the open tundra of the Arctic and wintering across the northern edges of the temperate zone. Its iconic white plumage, which provides camouflage against snow, is achieved through feather structure rather than pigmentation, in the same way that polar bear fur appears white through light scattering. The snowy owl is the heaviest owl species in North America and one of the heaviest in the world, with a body mass that reflects the thermal demands of maintaining warm-blooded activity in Arctic winter conditions. Its feathering is extraordinarily dense, with feathers covering not just the body, but the legs, feet, and even the bases of the bill and the cerri, providing insulation against temperatures that can drop to -50 degrees Celsius in the high Arctic winter. The snowy owl hunts primarily by sight in the continuous daylight of the Arctic summer, making it one of the most visually dependent owl species rather than the acoustically specialized hunters that are the owl family's reputation. It is an owl that has colonized the planet's coldest biome by systematically modifying or suppressing many of the typical owl adaptations and replacing them with the thermal and sensory solutions that the Arctic specifically requires. The Eurasian eagle owl is the largest owl species by wingspan, reaching up to 188 centimeters, and its prey list is among the most impressive of any owl, including foxes, young deer, herons, other raptors including other owl species, and waterfowl, in addition to the small mammals that constitute the staple diet of most owls. This apex predator status within the owl family comes with a set of behavioral characteristics not typical of smaller owl species, including a more overt and assertive territorial behavior, a longer breeding season and more extended care of young, and a dominance posture toward other raptors that reflects the eagle owl's actual ecological position at the top of the nocturnal avian predator hierarchy in most of its range. Eagle owls have been documented killing and eating peregrine falcons, goshawks, and long-eared owls, and the presence of an eagle-owl territory in an area strongly suppresses the breeding density of other raptor species through a combination of direct predation risk and the displacement of smaller raptors from optimal territories. The eagle-owl does not share the night. It owns it. The evolutionary history of owls extends further back into geological time than most other bird families. And the fossil record, while imperfect and incomplete in the ways that preserve some lineages better than others, suggests that owls have been the dominant nocturnal avian predators of terrestrial ecosystems for at least 60 million years. Appearing in the fossil record shortly after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs, cleared the ecological stage for the rapid diversification of modern bird families in the Paleocene and Eocene. The oldest known owl fossils from Paleocene deposits of approximately 60 million years ago already show several of the key morphological features that characterize modern owls, suggesting that the fundamental owl body plan and its associated hunting adaptations were established quickly after the family diverged from whatever diurnal raptor ancestors gave rise to it. The details of owl evolutionary origins are still somewhat contested, with different analyses of the molecular and morphological data suggesting slightly different relationships to other raptor groups. But the age of the family is not in doubt, and 60 million years of relatively conservative morphological evolution speaks to the effectiveness of the basic design. A modern owl family is divided into two subfamilies that differ in several morphological and behavioral respects, and whose split from a common ancestor occurred early in owl evolution. The Titonidae, the barn owls and their close relatives, are distinguished by their characteristic heart-shaped facial disc, their long legs, and some details of skull anatomy and ear structure that are more derived and specialized than those of the Strigidae. The Strigidae, containing the vast majority of owl species, and sometimes called the typical owls, show the more rounded facial disc and the greater diversity of form and ecological adaptation that comes with a group containing nearly 250 species diversified across every available habitat. The barn owl represents a specific extreme of acoustic specialization, with the most asymmetric ears and the most precise sound localization documented for any bird, while the Strigidae include species across the full spectrum, from highly acoustic hunters to primarily visual predators, to the diurnal specialists like the burrowing owl and the northern hawk owl. The conservation status of owls varies enormously across the family, from species that are among the most widespread and adaptable birds on Earth, to species whose populations have been reduced to the point of critical endangerment. The barn owl is one of the most widespread birds in the world, breeding on every continent except Antarctica, and in habitats ranging from tropical forests to temperate farmlands to desert edge environments. And its adaptability to agricultural landscapes, where it exploits abundant rodent populations around granaries and hayfields, has made it broadly successful despite the loss of natural nest sites in old hollow trees. At the other extreme, the forest owlet of India was not observed by scientists for over a century after its first collection, from 1873 until its rediscovery in 1997, and currently survives in a small number of fragmented forest patches in central India, with a total population estimated in the hundreds. The Philippine eagle owl, confined to a few islands in the Philippine archipelago, faces continuing pressure from deforestation that has reduced its forest habitat to a fraction of its historical extent. The giant forest species of tropical Asia and Africa, which depend on large-diameter old-growth trees for nesting cavities and old-growth forest structure for hunting are disproportionately represented among the owl species currently listed as threatened or vulnerable. The relationship between human settlement and owl populations has been mixed, with some species thriving in the modified landscapes that human land use creates, and others declining precipitously as the specific habitat features they depend on are removed or degraded. The little owl, introduced to Britain in the late 19th century, has become a familiar element of the rural British landscape, while the tawny owl, which requires mature deciduous woodland for both nesting and hunting, has declined measurably in areas where woodland management has reduced the availability of large, cavity-bearing old trees. The barn owl's dependence on rough, unimproved grassland for hunting, combined with its use of old buildings and hollow trees for nesting, has made it sensitive to both agricultural intensification that reduces the grassland prey base and building renovation that removes nest sites. And barn owl populations across intensively farmed parts of Europe have declined significantly in recent decades, despite conservation efforts that have included the installation of artificial nest boxes on a large scale. The response of owl populations to landscape change reflects the specific ecological requirements of each species, rather than any general rule about owls and human land use. And effective owl conservation requires understanding those specific requirements in sufficient detail to identify what limiting factors are actually operating in particular landscapes. To follow an owl through a single hunting night is to encounter a form of sensory life so different from the human experience of the same hours that the word night feels like it belongs to two separate realities. The human night is a sensory impoverishment, a withdrawal of the visual information that structures our experience of the world, leaving us navigating by memory and inference in an environment that reveals itself only grudgingly to eyes designed for daylight. The owl's night is the opposite. It is a sensory opening, the moment when the visual system comes fully online in conditions optimized for its specific design. When the ears begin to do what no other bird's ears can do, when the flight feathers silence the air, and the world of small scurrying things beneath the grass becomes as legible as a page of text. The owl does not tolerate the night. The owl's hunting night unfolds through phases that are as structured as the hours of a working day. In the early dark, when the last traces of civil twilight are fading and the first fully nocturnal insects and rodents are becoming active, the owl moves from its day roost to a series of hunting perches distributed across its territory, pausing at each for minutes or longer, turning the facial disc like a radar dish across the grass below, integrating sound and whatever residual visual information the deepening dark still offers. Each hunting perch has been selected through experience, positioned to provide auditory access to areas where prey is abundant, positioned to allow the detection of prey sounds against the directional acoustic background of wind and vegetation. The perch network is a map of the territory's hunting quality, and the owl's progression through it in the early part of the night is a systematic sampling of that map, searching for the sounds that indicate prey activity. When the sound is found, what follows happens faster than most observers can track. The barn owl's wings open from the roosting posture, the initial wing beats driving a rapid acceleration toward the source of the sound. Then the wings spreading to a glide as the velocity carries the bird forward and downward toward the target below. The final approach is nearly silent, the serrated feathers doing their work in the air above the unsuspecting mouse. The feet come forward, the talons spread to a precise spread, calibrated by the acoustic information about the prey's head location, and the strike is over in a fraction of a second. For the prey, there is almost no warning. For the owl, the entire sequence from sound detection to successful strike has taken perhaps 15 seconds of a night that contains 30,000 more of them, and the bird is already banking back toward a perch to consume what it has caught and reset the listening posture for the next opportunity. Across the full night, a barn owl in good hunting conditions may make dozens of strikes, succeeding in a fraction of them. And the pattern of successes and failures is not random. Experience shapes the owl's hunting behavior in ways that favor the approaches and perch locations that have previously been productive. And the individual owl that has hunted the same territory for several years has accumulated a detailed behavioral map of where and when hunting is most rewarding across the seasonal cycle. Young owls in their first winter hunting unfamiliar territory without the benefit of this accumulated knowledge have measurably lower hunting success rates than experienced adults, and face a correspondingly higher risk of starvation during periods of prey scarcity. The experience that distinguishes the successful owl from the struggling one is not instinct, but learning, built up across seasons and encoded in the behavioral choices that determine where the owl hunts and how it responds to the specific conditions of each night. And then the sky begins to lighten, not visibly at first, but in a way that the owl apparently detects before human eyes could confirm. And the night hunting is over. The owl returns to its day roost, the same hollow tree or dense conifer or barn rafter that has served as its shelter for weeks or months, folds its wings and becomes invisible to the diurnal world that is just beginning to stir around it. The small birds that will find and mob it when daylight reveals its presence do not know it is there yet. The mice that will emerge from their burrows as the temperature rises do not know how close they came to last night's talons. The field below the roost is as quiet and ordinary in the morning light as it always appears, giving no indication of what passed over it through the dark hours. The owl has returned to stillness, its work done, its night complete. One more night added to the accumulating record of a life spent in the hours that everything else tries to sleep through. The room is very quiet now, as quiet as the field beneath the owl's roost in the early morning after a night of hunting. The owl is still, the way something is still when it is exactly where it belongs, folded into its day rest with the patience of an animal that has all night again tomorrow and knows it. You have been tonight inside eyes that cannot move, but see in near darkness more clearly than daylight sees anything. Inside ears set at different heights on a skull that hears three-dimensional space as clearly as you see the room around you. Inside feathers engineered to silence the air itself. Inside a brain that maps auditory space as precisely as a surveyor maps terrain, and strikes what it cannot see with the accuracy of something that has been practicing since before the mammals it hunts had learned to run from anything that flew. The owl is one of the oldest designs in the sky. It has been hunting nights like this one for 60 million years, and every modification it carries, every hollow feather shaft, every asymmetric ear position, every sclerotic ossicle holding those enormous fixed eyes in place, was tested over all of that time against the one question that matters: can you feed yourself in the dark? The answer, delivered in silence from somewhere just above the grass, is the same tonight as it has always been. Yes, Good night.